YouTube, what the crap's going on? HeirofCarthage here. I want to talk a little bit about the vampire versus greenskin matchup in the current state of the game. What does that matchup look like? What advantages do each faction bring to the game? And how does it stack up for them in general? I worked pretty hard to play a game as the vampire counts tonight because it's been a while since I've played as them. But most of the time when you pick the vampire counts in a ladder battle, your opponent's just going to quit. So I got 3 matches in a row where, I mean, like the instant I switched to vampires, opponent quit. Didn't ask me for certain rules or anything. They just quit. They're not interested. And it's because they've all gotten Cryptor spammed really bad, and they're sick of it. So that's understandable. But at the same time, let's talk about kind of what the factions have to offer and what makes them deadly. So a few units right now for the Cryptors make them dead, or for the Cryptors. That's probably what they should rename the faction right now. No, the vampires. So what makes them strong? One of the units is the Cryptor. In and of itself, this unit is pretty strong, but it's not insurmountable by any means. Why is it strong? It has armor-piercing attacks. This is a huge piece of it. It has poison attack. And poison attack means that when this creature hits a unit, it's going to poison that unit, which is going to hurt. I know at least I think the attack and the defense could be a leadership thing as well. I can't remember all the stats. We'll see it in the battle, though. So it lowers the effectiveness of units near it. But like I said, in and of itself, this unit can still die because it can get mobbed by lots more units. When you combine it with a cheap skeleton warrior, now all of a sudden you have a very potent combination. The skeleton warriors have 6,240 hit points that can be used to tank damage for the Cryptors, who also regenerate. This regeneration thing, when used in conjunction with the skeleton warriors tanking HP, means that these guys can usually keep themselves alive for an absurdly long time in combat when supported by a cheap unit like either skeleton warriors or skeleton spearmen. So this is one of the main combinations from an infantry standpoint that makes vampires deadly. The other thing that makes vampires deadly is Manfred von Karstein. This guy is a very good general in the sense that he is a lore of death, and he has a lore of vampire. Lore of vampire is not that good, but he has lore of death. And lore of death, I've covered this before. We'll cover it again. The 2 main spells here that are going to make these people deadly is the Spirit Leech. This one is a direct damage spell that is good versus single combatants, so it's really good at killing lords or other single entity units. It's a click and damage done. That's it. So it's a click it and forget it type spell. That's why it works so good. It has 100 range, and it makes von Karstein very deadly to enemy heroes and lords. The Fate of Buna makes von Karstein extremely deadly to elite cavalry or infantry units who have multiple combatants. This spell is absolutely devastating. 1 click will bring a Demigryph Knight to its knees. Same thing with a Grail Knights, Great Swords, Black Orcs, you name it. It'll bring any of those units to their knees instantly. So this is why the vampires are strong from a Lord standpoint. Not only that, you add to that the flexibility that von Karstein has in the form of his mounts. He can be on the ground on a horse and get around pretty good. But typically you're going to see him mounted on this Hellsteed. The Hellsteed has really good speed. It's not going to make him like the strongest in melee, but it has really good speed. And this is going to help him get around the battlefield very quickly, cast these spells, and get away successfully, yet still be able to swoop in from the sky and do a rear charge as necessary. You will sometimes see him on the Zombie Dragon, but as you can see here, the Zombie Dragon is considerably slower at only 90 speed, so the Hellsteed is a very quick choice. So what else makes the vampires dangerous? They're flexible. They actually have quite a few different unit types, though you'll rarely see any of these unit types used. Your typical vampire army online right now is going to look a little something like this. Probably like 4 zombies, and then they're going to spam out an absolute ton of Cryptors. These guys are going to be the mainstay for any vampire spammer out there right now. And then another thing I'll see a lot of times is you'll see them spam off another vampiress here because she comes with Lore of Death also. So you can stick her on a Hellsteed along with von Karstein on the Hellsteed, and look how much money I still have left. So the combination of these two, this vampiress, or vampire as they just call her here, she can fly forward and absorb the Lord abilities and even the melee combat before von Karstein ever gets there, and she has Spirit Leech and Fate of Buna. And it makes her a very cost-effective meat shield for von Karstein, who it is critically important stays alive in a vampire battle. So this is why the vampires are so strong. Look, all this stuff here, and I've still got 2,000, and I'm only on large funds. This isn't because these zombies are so cheap. It leaves you, like I said, with a huge number of options. So you could throw a couple of Vargeist in here if you needed quick moving to get to artillery. You can put Fell Bats in here, and Fell Bats will actually stop the charge of a unit like Demigryph Knights, making them more vulnerable to Cryptors or slowing them down while you use Fate of Buna. You could also come in here and get a couple of Black Knights, as well as maybe even 2 more Skeleton Warriors. So I mean, you can have a huge army. And remember, vampire armies don't break. If you start defeating them decisively, they will crumble, but if you can't start defeating them decisively, they will fight to the death. Literally all of them, or to the undeath, whatever you want to call it with the vampires. So that's the strengths of the vampires. Cryptors combined with cheap infantry, combined with Lore of Death, and then a little bit of extra flexibility on units if you need it. But typically, this kind of army is going to be very dangerous to most online armies. Now, the Greenskins, on the other hand, do have a very versatile faction, but in some ways I feel like they have a few more limitations than you'll find with the vampires, but they also have some strengths that I really like. You have Azag the Slaughterer here, and he only has Skullmuncher as a mount, which is not quite as fast as a Hellsteed, but it's close. Skullmuncher is faster than the Zombie Dragon as well, and Azag comes with Lore of Death, which means he can also bring Spirit Leech and Fate of Buna, making him again very dangerous. Now the trick to Fate of Buna is, though, you can use it on Cryptors and it will drain a lot of their life, but they regenerate while it's happening, and so it really minimizes the effect of Fate of Buna, and this leaves the Greenskins at somewhat of a disadvantage to the vampires, because the vampires can Fate of Buna a Boar Boy or one of their infantry units, and it's going to be very effective because they don't regenerate, whereas the Cryptors do regenerate. Now, that said, I feel like the Greenskins have some interesting units. The Orc Biggins are going to have a bonus versus large. This would apply against Cryptors, so they would get a damage bonus versus large units. So do Savage Orc Biggins. I've seen people bring Black Orcs against vampires, and I don't really recommend it, because so many vampire players these days are not going to bring an armored infantry unit, and that's really what Black Orcs are meant to counter. They're meant to counter an armored infantry unit. They're armor piercing, and they're well armored themselves. If you throw these guys in against Cryptors, it's going to minimize their effectiveness in my mind. I really think you should stick to other infantry units that have a little more versatility. Now, Savage Orcs are a good unit against the vampires too, because they deal a ton of damage, and the vampire players usually aren't bringing any units that have charge defense. It's rare that you'll see a vampire player bring the Skeleton Spearmen. So these guys can be very effective with their large charge bonus and their pretty high melee attack. So, and the vampires don't have missiles either, so you don't have to worry about these guys getting shot. The Greenskins do have a couple other nice things going for them. They do have the Spider Riders, which can shoot poison attacks, so you can try and poison the vampires as well. They are a little expensive, though. Spider Riders. Archers. You can use standard Spider Riders for that poison effect as well. The other good thing that the Orcs have going for them is nice shock cavalry for the price. These Orc Boar Boys will do a lot of damage to infantry units, but again, the problem is you're typically going to be seeing Cryptors only, and these Orc Boar Boys makes it more difficult for them to pay off. Now, there are a couple of units that are pretty good to bring, I think, as the Greenskins against vampires. A Giant is pretty hard for the vampires to kill, and the Arachnarok is pretty hard for the vampires to kill. Spirit Leech would help against these units, but that Spirit Leech almost has to be used against von Karstein, because if you don't kill von Karstein, you are rarely going to defeat a Vampire Rush, and he's going to be Spirit Leeching you. So these are good units in the sense that the vampires probably won't have spare winds of magic to use on these two units, and these two units can typically cause a horrendous amount of damage, and it takes Cryptors an extended period of time to kill a unit like this, if they're going to kill a unit like that. So I like the matchup between these two factions. There's a little bit of push and pull between them. You tell me who you think is the better faction. Let's go watch a replay where I get into it with the Greenskins. Again, I think it's an interesting matchup right now, because when it comes to Lore of Death, I didn't mean to pick this battle. When it comes to Lore of Death cheese, in fact, I'm going to cut this out. All right, here we have the correct battle. It was on Marbad's Tomb, which is an interesting map, actually. It's got a lot of choke points on this map. It can make for some interesting play. You see, my army is huge, and the Greenskins have opted for some of the things that I like and some of the things that I wasn't as big a fan of. These Black Orcs are 1,000 each. I do not have any armored infantry for them to chew away at. Are they a strong unit? Absolutely. But I think they're overkill for what they're going to be used against here. The Giant, I like. This guy deals huge splash damage. I don't have any arrows or archers or anything to counter him. And the Ragnarok Spider, again, huge damage to other units, and very little I can counter it with. I've already hit Azag with the Spirit Leech from my Vampire hero. She's floating around. Well, she was somewhere around on this flank. I don't know where she... Yeah, here she is over here. And then see, in return, I think he hits... I hit them with a Fate of Buna over here, too, so I'm going to hurt his Boar Boys. So already I'm demonstrating why the Vampires can make you hurt. But look at this. Just sends the Ragnarok right in to start tanking damage. Easily chews up one of my Skeleton Spearmen. And basically is going to make it hard for me to use my combination all the way across the line. But here, my Skeletons and Cryptors are going to combine against the Black Orcs. And honestly, the Black Orcs do not stand a chance here. They're going to get absolutely trounced. Over here, though, you're going to see these two units busy up half my army very effectively. And here I wasn't paying attention. Von Karstein's going to eat a Spirit Leech, and he's going to get attacked by Skullmuncher. And without his own zombie dragon, this is a battle Von Karstein will lose. And my winds of magic were low, so I try and use my speed to flee away. But with the charged speed bonus here, you can see Skullmuncher is reaching Von Karstein pretty nearly. So it's a pretty nasty fight so far. I do have my Black Knights lined up behind enemy lines. And a lot of Vampire players won't bring Black Knights. They'll just bring a ton of Crypt Horrors. I really actually kind of like some of the versatility you get out of the Black Knights. Maybe they're not like the spammiest way to fight an opponent, but again, I like the versatility. So I'm going to come and run some rear charges here on some of the Orc units. You'll see my Black Knights are going to drive home here. Against these Black Orcs that are poisoned, the charge bonus isn't really spectacular on Black Knights, but they're going to do some damage. There was a lot of missile cavalry units over here. I've got a Skeleton Spearman kind of keeping them bottlenecked over there, which worked out great for me. And I've got Skeleton Spearmen pouring in from the flanks over here, as well as Black Knights. And we are going to pretty quickly turn these Orc Boar Boys away from the fight. They're not going to really do all that well versus Cryptor. So you can see that in the meantime, I was able to kill Azag, and I didn't show you this, but basically Azag killed Von Karstein. But because I also have this Vampire, the Wizard, she's kind of helped uplifting morale. And the Greenskins are losing on the power bar, which is also helping my morale. Had I been losing, that would have been decisive. But the last Spirit Leech that Azag got on my Vampire, she's going to die as well. So there she goes. Have a nice flight. Poor girl. She was so nice. So anyway, now you're going to see that I'm actually going to struggle for a long time to pull down the Ragnarok and this Giant. These two units are just really hard for me to counter. I've got a lot of these Skeleton Spearmen, fortunately for me, but again, the splash damage off this Giant is pretty extreme. And the Cryptors will help against it because they can tank a lot of damage, but you can see that as the Giant is winning, a lot of my guys are actually kind of crumbling slowly. But again, I'm able to run off the main line of the Orc Infantry so that at least I can focus everything I have on what's left. And even cheap units like this, see the Zombie is going to tank hit points from the Spider. So all these units can be useful. The Vampires have hit points to throw away, whereas a lot of factions simply just do not have that luxury. The flexibility of the Black Knights, again, coming in handy here since I didn't just spam Cryptors. Of course, you can do that, and it does work out, unfortunately, far too often. But I can use my Black Knights to keep all these Spider Rider archers at bay, and I'm also using my Skeletons to kind of choke them away from the fight so that they can't fire their poison arrows in here, because the poison arrows would help a lot. I do think my men are actually getting poisoned by the Ragnarok. They are. So the Ragnarok is reducing... Look at the leadership here on my guys. You can see the Ragnarok definitely having an effect on my units, though I'm assuming that Cryptors are probably immune to poison, as is the Ragnarok. Anything that deals poison attacks is probably immune to poison, I would guess. So that's just a guess. Yeah, you can see this fight's going to drag on for quite a long time. The Ragnarok is truly a brutal unit. If you do not have the right ways to counter it, like Demigryph Knights with halberds are very good. The Ragnarok can cause some very extreme damage. And it's a unit that you definitely have to watch out for on the battlefield. So anyway, like I said, I really like the matchup between Vampires and Greenskins right now, even though the spells are kind of cheesy. Since the two kind of have equal spells, it comes down to who can, you know, build up the better army in general. I give the edge to the Vampires personally. In fact, I would, in my opinion, I kind of feel like the Vampires are probably the strongest faction online. If they are, then the Greenskins are a very close second in my, well, I don't know, it's hard to say. The Empire is actually really strong. I would definitely say the top three are going to be the Empire, the Vampires, and the Greenskins, and the other ones don't hold a candle to those three, not by a long shot. So that's just my thoughts. So I'm going to pull these Black Knights back in to help out against this regrouped unit of Black Orcs. Again, the weight of cavalry in Warhammer is a big deal. Just the mass can deal a lot of damage against infantry, even against a big heavy unit like Black Orcs. So I did manage to work out a victory here. You'll notice the interesting thing, though, the Orc only deployed about 458 because they had the Ragnarok, Azag, and there's not many men in the Black Orc units. And so, I mean, the Orcs got a considerable number of kills based on the number of men they had there. So you can definitely see that, I mean, a Ragnarok Spider, 175 kills, still had most of its health. The only reason it routed is because its whole army was gone. The Giant got 134 kills, doing quite well. I almost think if he would have taken his money, and since you get poison attacks out of the Ragnarok, repurpose these Spider Riders and the Black Orcs, and he probably could have punished me enough to win this. If he would have brought Biggins instead, they would have had a bonus versus the Cryptors, which would have been helpful. I do like the idea of bringing Boar Boys. You definitely want some mobility. It never hurts, especially if the Vampires are going to field it against you. And then also, Azag is kind of the smart choice against the Vampires, because you're going to have to try and counter their Lure of Death, which he actually did pretty successfully, partly due to my inattention in the game. But, I mean, Azag is definitely about as good a counter as you're going to get to the Vampire Lure of Death. Anyway, hope you all enjoyed this. Leave your thoughts down there in the comments. HeirofCarthage signing out for now.